There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when you tell yourself that what you've done is good enough. It slips out softly, without resistance, like an exhale after a long day, disguised as relief, but carrying a hidden weight. This moment feels harmless, even reasonable, because in the rush of life, choosing good enough feels like choosing peace. Yet beneath that calm surface, something begins to crack. This is the first fracture, where your potential starts to leak, unnoticed, one drop at a time. In this opening chapter, we step into that delicate mental space where mediocrity first introduces itself, not as an enemy, but as a friend whispering that you've done plenty, that rest is deserved, that excellence can wait. This is the comfort trap, and though it feels safe, it silently steals something irreplaceable. The world around you reinforces this comfort. Society praises convenience, applauds speed, rewards shortcuts, and often labels ambition as excessive. You're trained from childhood to avoid friction, to choose paths that demand less, to protect yourself from discomfort as if it were a threat instead of a teacher. Slowly, good enough becomes familiar. It becomes the default setting that saves energy in the moment but drains identity over time. You don't feel the loss immediately. There's no alarm, no sudden crash, no dramatic consequence. Instead, your standards shift by degrees, almost imperceptibly, as the bar for excellence lowers quietly while life continues unchanged on the surface. But under the surface, something essential starts to dim. This is the hidden danger. Good enough is rarely a dramatic surrender. It's a slow erosion, a subtle wearing down of hunger, creativity, ambition, and self-belief. The first time you settle is a choice. The 10th time is a habit. The 100th time is an identity that now feels natural, even though it was never truly you. And because there are no immediate consequences, the mind convinces itself that everything is fine, when in reality, you are quietly drifting away from the person you were meant to become. It's like living near the ocean. You don't feel the tide pulling you until you look up one day and realize the shore is far behind you. To illustrate this, imagine a craftsman shaping a sculpture. On the first day, he carves with passion, precision, and intention. But as days pass, he grows tired. The details begin to blur, the edges soften, and he tells himself that the small imperfections don't matter. But when the sculpture is finally complete, he sees the truth. It is not what it could have been. It reflects not his skill, but his compromises. This is the inner life of every person settling for just fine. No one sees the compromises in the moment, but the finished result, your career, your relationships, your character, reveals them with brutal honesty. The comfort you once trusted becomes a quiet thief, shaping a life that is functional, but never extraordinary. Yet the most dangerous part of good enough is not what it takes from your results, but what it takes from your spirit. Every time you settle, you reinforce the belief that your best isn't necessary, that your potential is negotiable, that striving is optional. Over time, this belief becomes a lens through which you view every new challenge. You start to interpret discomfort as a warning rather than an invitation. You begin choosing safety over growth, predictability over exploration, familiarity over evolution, and slowly, you forget what it feels like to truly try. The fire that once pushed you forward becomes a faint ember, still warm, but no longer capable of lighting your path. By the end of this chapter, one truth must become clear. Good enough is not a harmless choice. It is a quiet rewiring of your identity. It feels safe, but safety is not the same as fulfillment. It feels peaceful, but comfort is not the same as purpose. Settling reshapes your story from the inside out, long before the consequences are visible on the outside. This is the beginning of the cost, a cost that accumulates silently, waiting for the day when you finally wonder why your life doesn't feel like your own. And that is where the next chapter takes us, into the compounding interest of small compromises, where the real toll becomes impossible to ignore. Compromise rarely looks dangerous at first glance. It's subtle, almost polite, slipping into your decisions with the soft promise of convenience. A skipped workout, a delayed dream, a project you complete just to get it off your plate. Alone, these moments seem harmless, so small that they barely register in your memory. But life doesn't measure your choices individually, it measures them collectively. And the truth is simple. What you repeat, you become. Each good enough choice is like depositing a coin into an invisible account. One coin means nothing, but over months and years, you look back and realize that you've been funding a version of yourself you never intended to create. One built on hesitation instead of hunger, comfort instead of conviction. Let's step into a real scenario. Picture someone who dreams of building a career that excites them. On the first day, they feel unstoppable. They push hard, stay focused, and aim high. But after a few weeks, they're tired. They meet deadlines, but not with passion, just enough to say it's done. They stop learning new skills. They avoid risks. They accept roles beneath their capabilities because they feel predictable and safe. Nothing dramatic happens, but something internal shifts. 10 years later, they're still in the same place, same job, same routine, same frustration, wondering how life passed so quickly. But it didn't pass quickly. It passed quietly in the small compromises that accumulated when no one was watching. The same happens in relationships. A couple stops talking deeply. They stop trying to impress each other. They stop showing appreciation, telling themselves the relationship is fine as it is. But fine becomes the slow poison of connection. Nothing explodes, no dramatic breakup, just a slow fading, like colors left too long in the sun. Years later, they look at each other and feel like strangers, two people who shared a home but not a life. The emotional distance wasn't created by one catastrophic moment. It was built through the compounding interest of tiny, everyday neglect. Health follows the same pattern. You skip one workout, then 3. You choose convenience over nutrition. You sleep less, stress more, and promise yourself you'll fix it later. Later becomes a moving target. Meanwhile, your energy drops, your confidence erodes, and your body becomes a reflection of choices you barely remember making. The doctor eventually gives you a warning, but by then, the interest on your compromises has already grown heavy. This is the price of settling, not in one moment but in 1,000 unnoticed ones. There's a harsh psychological cost too. Every time you choose less than your best, you send a message to your subconscious. My potential doesn't matter. And the subconscious listens. It adjusts your expectations, narrows your dreams, and shrinks your belief in what's possible. Soon, you start avoiding challenges because you've trained yourself to think that effort is optional and excellence is excessive. You become the person who fears failure more than they desire growth, not because you lack talent, but because your repeated compromises have quietly shaped your identity into someone who no longer expects greatness from themselves. To make this even clearer, imagine your life as a long hallway lined with doors, each door a potential future. Every time you settle for good enough, one door closes, not with drama, not with noise, but with a soft click you barely notice. At first, there are hundreds, then dozens, then a handful. One day you reach for a door you once dreamed of opening, only to find it sealed by years of small compromises. The opportunities didn't disappear suddenly. They expired over time, slowly, silently, and permanently. This chapter carries a difficult truth. Compromise compounds. It grows in the background, invisible until the weight becomes impossible to ignore. But recognizing this pattern is the first step toward breaking it. Because once you understand how small choices shape the trajectory of your entire life, you gain the power to redirect it. You can stop the quiet drift toward mediocrity and consciously choose a path that demands more of you, but also rewards you with a life that feels fully lived, not merely tolerated. And in the next chapter, we'll explore the deeper losses hidden beneath these compromises, the ones that cut far beyond missed opportunities, touching the core of who you are. There is a kind of loss that doesn't show up in your bank account, your resume, or your calendar. It doesn't make noise. It doesn't announce itself, and no one around you may ever notice it. But you notice it, quietly, internally, in the places where your identity lives. This is the unseen cost of good enough. It's the erosion of self-respect that happens when you consistently choose convenience over commitment. You feel it when you avoid a challenge you know you're capable of conquering, or when you settle for a version of yourself that feels smaller than who you were meant to be. Over time, the gap between the person you are and the person you could be becomes a silent ache, a discomfort you can't quite explain but can't fully ignore either. The heartbreaking part is that the world will rarely punish you for settling. You can build an entire life around fine, and no one will confront you about it. That's why the cost is so dangerous, because it's invisible to everyone except you. You feel it when you look back on a year and realize you didn't grow. You feel it when someone asks about your dreams and you hesitate, not because you don't have them, but because you don't trust yourself to pursue them anymore. Good enough dulls the edges of your ambition, smoothing away the parts of you that once reached for more. It makes your world safer, but also smaller. What you lose isn't comfort. It's depth, color, excitement, and the spark that makes life feel meaningful. Another invisible cost is the loss of innovation. Human progress, personal or societal, comes from challenging norms, questioning assumptions, and refusing to accept the first version of anything. But when you settle, you stop thinking creatively. You stop asking what if and why not. You become a passive participant in your own life, following routines instead of creating possibilities. Over time, your mind loses its sharpness. You stop imagining new paths, new solutions, or new expressions of your potential. It's not that you become less intelligent, it's that you stop feeding the part of your mind that invents, explores, and transforms. Settling isn't just a decision, it's the slow death of curiosity. Then there is the emotional cost, the subtle disappointment you carry when you know you're not honoring your gifts. This disappointment doesn't scream, it whispers. It shows up as irritation, low energy, or a feeling that something is missing even when, on paper, your life looks fine. You start envying people who take risks, not because they're more talented, but because they refuse to live half alive. You start avoiding mirrors, not because you dislike how you look, but because you dislike how you've been living. The emotional tax of settling is cumulative. Every time you shrink yourself, a part of you keeps the receipt. Fear plays a huge role in this loss. Fear of failing, fear of looking foolish, fear of wanting something and not getting it. Good enough becomes a shield against those fears. It's easier to aim low because low targets rarely disappoint. But here's the paradox. While settling protects you from failure, it also guarantees a deeper kind of failure, the failure to experience your own potential. It's the failure no one sees but you, the failure that lives inside the sentence, "I could have done more." This fear traps you in a loop where you avoid discomfort, but also avoid greatness. And then there's the cost in your personal narrative, the story you tell yourself about who you are. Every time you choose good enough, you rewrite that story. You shift from being the protagonist to being a spectator. You trade courage for caution, passion for predictability. At first, these edits seem small, like changing a sentence or removing a scene. But eventually, the entire plot shifts. You no longer recognize the hero you once imagined yourself becoming. Settling doesn't just affect your actions, it reshapes your identity. And once your identity shrinks, your entire world shrinks with it. By the end of this chapter, one truth becomes undeniable. The real cost of good enough isn't found in lost opportunities. It's found in lost potential, lost clarity, lost passion, and the slow fading of the person you were designed to become. But awareness is the first turning point, because once you see the price you're paying, you gain the power to stop paying it. And now in the next chapter, we step boldly into the solution, what it truly takes to break the cycle and reclaim the standards that lead to the life you were meant to live. Breaking the good enough cycle doesn't begin with a dramatic transformation. It begins with awareness, an honest moment where you stop long enough to recognize the places where you've been settling. This is often the hardest step, because it requires courage to admit that you've accepted far less than what you're capable of. But awareness is not self-blame, it's liberation. It's the moment you stand in front of your life, like someone waking from a long sleep, finally seeing the corners where you've dimmed your own light. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. This clarity, uncomfortable as it is, marks the beginning of change. Because you cannot fight what you refuse to acknowledge, and you cannot rise above a standard you never measure. The next step is identifying the areas of your life where good enough has taken root. Maybe it's your career, where you've accepted predictability instead of purpose. Maybe it's your health, where you've let excuses replace discipline. Maybe it's your relationships, where meaningful conversations have been replaced with routine. Or maybe it's your inner world, your goals, your habits, your self-belief. You don't need to change everything at once. You just need to pick one area, one corner of your life that deserves better. Because transformation doesn't start with a revolution. It starts with a decision. This part of my life will no longer be ruled by mediocrity. Then comes the most transformative, but often uncomfortable step, raising your standards. This isn't about perfection, it's about intention. It's about deciding that fine is no longer acceptable when you are capable of excellence. High standards don't demand dramatic heroism, they demand consistency. They ask you to show up even when you don't feel like it. They ask you to push one step beyond comfort. They ask you to honor your potential in the small choices, not just the big ones. When you raise your standards, your life begins to reorganize itself around them. People treat you differently. Opportunities shift. Your identity transforms. Because your standards shape your destiny far more than your goals ever will. A powerful way to break the good enough cycle is to embrace discomfort as a teacher instead of an enemy. Discomfort is a sign of growth, not danger. It's the stretching of your boundaries, the strengthening of your character, the sharpening of your abilities. Most people run from discomfort because they interpret it as a threat. But the truth is that every meaningful achievement in human history was born from someone willing to feel uncomfortable longer than most. When you choose discomfort intentionally, whether through discipline, learning, vulnerability, or perseverance, you unlock a level of potential that comfort can never offer. Another critical step is setting goals that actually challenge you. Not goals that feel safe, predictable, or guaranteed, but goals that stretch your imagination. Goals that make you nervous. Goals that pull you forward rather than let you stay still. The mind comes alive in the presence of a challenge. It wakes up, focuses, and accesses creativity that comfort keeps dormant. When your goals intimidate you a little, it's a sign you're aiming correctly. And every small step you take toward them reinforces the belief that you are someone who moves, grows, and evolves instead of settling and shrinking. Breaking the cycle also requires honesty about your environment. Who you spend time with shapes what feels normal. If you surround yourself with people who settle, you will eventually settle too. But if you place yourself near people who push harder, think bigger, and refuse to accept good enough, your standards naturally rise to match theirs. Changing your environment doesn't always mean changing people. It can mean changing what you consume, what you read, what you listen to, and what you allow to influence your mind. You must curate your environment as intentionally as you curate your goals. Finally, breaking the good enough cycle comes down to one simple but powerful habit: making one courageous decision every day. Not 50, not 10, just one. One decision that aligns with your higher standards instead of your lower impulses. One action that pushes you an inch past your comfort zone. One moment where you choose growth over ease. These small decisions are how extraordinary lives are built, not through sudden transformation, but through daily alignment. And when these choices compound over time, you begin to notice something incredible. You're no longer fighting the good enough mentality. You're outgrowing it. As this chapter closes, you stand at a turning point. You now see the patterns. You understand the cost, and you have the tools to break free. But knowing how to escape the cycle is only half the journey. The real transformation begins when you start reclaiming the version of yourself that excellence requires. And that journey, your return to your extraordinary potential, is the heart of the next chapter. Reclaiming your extraordinary potential begins with a single realization. The person you want to become has been waiting for you, not in some distant future, not after perfection, not after you fix every flaw, but here, right now, beneath the layers of compromise and the weight of good enough. Potential isn't something you earn, it's something you uncover. It's the part of you that has always known you were capable of more, even when your habits, your fears, or your environment tried to convince you otherwise. And the moment you decide to rise, even quietly, life responds. You feel a shift, a returning energy, a renewed hunger, a spark that whispers, "This is who you were supposed to be." That spark is the beginning of your comeback. Reclaiming your potential requires intentional rebuilding, not rushing, not forcing, not demanding instant results, but reconstructing your identity piece by piece, choice by choice, day by day. You begin by honoring small commitments. You set standards that feel worthy of the life you want. You do the work not because someone is watching, but because you refuse to betray yourself anymore. Each act of discipline becomes a message to your subconscious. I am returning. Each decision to push harder becomes a vote for the person you're becoming. And slowly, the distance between who you are and who you want to be starts to shrink. As you rise, something powerful happens. Opportunities you once believed were out of reach begin to open again. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because you did. Your presence shifts. Your voice strengthens. Your mind becomes clearer, more alive, more ambitious. You begin to think in possibilities instead of limitations. You become someone who sees beyond the obvious, someone who questions the old rules, someone who designs their life instead of accepting the default version. This is the stage where you stop surviving and start creating, a version of you that feels both unfamiliar and deeply true at the same time. Reclaiming your potential also means confronting fear in a new way. Instead of avoiding it, you walk toward it. You treat fear as information, not an obstacle. You ask what it's protecting, what it's hiding, what it's pointing to. And often you discover that fear is guarding the very things you desire most: purpose, growth, connection, excellence. When you understand this, fear no longer controls you. It becomes a compass. And every step you take through it expands the size of your life. You begin to see that extraordinary potential isn't unlocked through ease. It's unlocked through courage. Along this journey, you realize something even deeper. Your potential isn't just about what you achieve. It's about who you become. It's the strength you build when you choose discipline over distraction. It's the integrity you forge when you keep promises to yourself. It's the boldness you cultivate when you pursue dreams others find unreasonable. It's the humility of starting again, even after years of settling. Your potential isn't measured in accomplishments alone. It's measured in the character you develop in the pursuit of those accomplishments. And that character becomes the foundation of a life you can be proud of. Then comes the ripple effect. As you reclaim your greatness, the world around you begins to transform. Your relationships grow deeper because you bring more presence. Your work becomes more meaningful because you bring more intention. Your habits become stronger because you bring more commitment. People begin to sense your shift, not because you boast about it, but because excellence radiates silently. You become an example, a catalyst, a reminder to others that settling is optional and that greatness is available to anyone willing to rise. Your transformation becomes a beacon in a world addicted to good enough. And finally, reclaiming your extraordinary potential brings you face to face with the most important truth of all. The life you want will not come from a single moment of inspiration. It will come from the accumulation of thousands of courageous decisions. Decisions to show up, decisions to push harder, decisions to refuse the easy path, decisions to honor your calling even when no one claps for you. When you choose excellence consistently, your life begins to align with your highest identity. You become the architect of your destiny instead of the passenger. And this, ultimately, is the reward for refusing to settle. A life that feels fully lived, deeply fulfilling, and unmistakably yours. So as this final chapter closes, here is the invitation. Look at your life and choose one area, just one, where good enough has taken root. Question it, challenge it, raise the standard. Take one action today that aligns with the extraordinary version of yourself, because your potential is not lost. It is not gone. It is not ruined by the past. It is simply waiting for you to reclaim it. And when you do, everything changes. Not instantly, but inevitably. Your story is far from over, and the most powerful chapters have yet to be written.